If I had the chance to hold your hand. All right. All right. This is Sports for Real with Coach Hall on an early Monday morning. Got a few minutes to wrap about what's been going on lately in the sports world. Of course, the buzz is the college football playoffs. And it's a lot of stuff going on surrounding that. A lot of people are happy, but an awful lot of people are very unhappy. And let's get into that in a minute. But before we start with that, what about those Kansas City Chiefs, man? How many lives do they have? It doesn't matter who they play, they always seem to find a way to win. But the question is, would you rather get lucky now? And what happened to them last night allowed them to clinch the AFC West again. So they're going to be in the playoffs. So now they're going to be fighting for that number one seed. But would you rather have the luck now, or would you rather get that bounce later on in the playoffs? And bounce is the operative word here because last night they melted the clock down after getting the first down. Chargers burn up all their timeouts. They bring in the kicker for a chip shot field goal to win it. Well, he hooked it, and it hits the crossbar. And it hits the crossbar, and it bounces in. Kansas City wins. Now, if that had been some other hard luck team, or that had been my football team, that thing would have hit and bounced back the other way, and we'd have been hot at that kicker because here we are icing the clock for you to go ahead and seal it, and you go ahead and make a bad kick like that. Seen it happen before. Nothing's guaranteed, even for the Chiefs, but they keep winning games like that. It attests to their championship spirit and heart, but at some point, it's going to come back to bite them. And after winning two straight championships and you living by the edge of your seat, it's just a matter of time before they go. Now, let's talk about this NCAA college football playoffs. They released the brackets yesterday, and to a lot of surprise, it's going to be controversial, which I kind of predicted. So let's just go through the seeds first. Oregon, no surprise, is the number one seed, followed by Georgia after knocking off Texas. Boise State is 3. Arizona State is 4. And the other conference champion, Clemson, they're all the way down to 12. Why are they 12? Well, they are 12 because they upset SMU. Clemson is not supposed to be in this game, man. And the fact that they beat SMU, somewhat of a miracle, even though, they separated a little bit there and they came back to probably pull away. But SMU, I believe they were a little starstruck about the environment, and it took them a while to get going. But when they found that they were about to get extinguished, and if the league was too big, they was going to be left out of the playoffs altogether, they started to play some football. And they came on back, and only to get snake bit by a field goal kick in the end. Tell me Jay Shree Ram. I don't know what that means, man. All right. So the top four conference champions were going to get a bye. That's why you have Boise State and Arizona State in there. And Clemson, with the upset, they have 3 losses. They ended up with the 12th seed. All right. So the controversy now. How you doing, India? Cobra, CRPF Commando. I am from India. Hello. Okay. The controversy lies with the rest of the choices. Texas, after losing to Georgia for the second time, is now the 5th seed. Penn State is 6. They lost to Oregon in the Big Ten championship. Notre Dame is 7. Ohio State 8. Tennessee 9. Indiana 10. SMU is 11. And, of course, Clemson is 12. Now, that gives you 4 Big Ten teams, and you have 3 SEC teams. But the big controversy is, why don't the SEC have 4 teams themselves? Everybody was expecting Alabama to get in, even though they had 3 losses. They were going to jump SMU if SMU lost or didn't play to the best of their abilities. Well, it looked like Clemson was going to blow out SMU before they make that comeback. And a lot of people in Alabama were getting excited because they just knew they had their ticket punched. Well, they felt jilted by the committee because they were led to believe or they wanted to think that they were led to believe that Alabama would get into the playoffs over SMU if they lost that game. Well, it didn't happen that way, and Alabama is left out. All right, Ohio State should be over Penn State as they both have a common loss. Ohio State has head-to-head. Okay, hold that thought. Now, Alabama, to me, with the 3 losses, I think they had a chance to jump Georgia and knock Georgia out if Georgia had lost that game. And the fact that Alabama got left out, I would have been proved correct again. That would have been the second year in a row Georgia got knocked off. So the problem that the people are having is that the conference championship games really had no weight on the playoffs. So wherever you were frozen before the playoffs, that's pretty much where you stayed. The only team that was really in danger here of being left off was SMU, and it all depended on how they played. Well, they played well enough to earn their spot in the playoffs, and that's what has SEC and Alabama fans hot. Now, going back to Icy Baller J, you said Ohio State beat Penn State, which they did. They have common loss, and Ohio State has head-to-head. That is correct. Now, let's go back a few years ago. Penn State beat Ohio State, won the Big Ten, and they still left them out of the playoffs in favor of Ohio State. So if that was okay for Ohio State to do, which should not have been done at that time, then they're going to have to accept this. But they can't even complain about anything because they are in the playoffs. So once you get to the playoffs, everybody is 0-0, despite what your ranking is. And it probably works out even better for Penn State and Ohio State because they both have home games in the first round. And those matchups, Ohio State is going to play Tennessee. That should be a pretty good football game. And you also have Penn State taking on SMU. A lot of people feel that Penn State has the best of that draw until you realize the fact that the winner of the Penn State game is going to have to play Georgia. And I don't know if Penn State can match up with Georgia. I told you before that Georgia has an extremely large heart. And if the game is close toward the end of the season, end of the year, or end of the game, Georgia's probably going to pull it out. They've been doing that for the last couple of years, and a little bit different from the way they've been winning the last few years. But still, Georgia's a team you have to beat. And I said if Carson Beck if he threw all those interceptions like he's been throwing the last couple of weeks, he's going to lose. And I think if he doesn't get hurt, Georgia would have lost. So the best thing happened to him is he got his hand hurt, and he should be able to play in 2 weeks, but we'll see. All right, Chris Miller says, hey, bro, keep going. You know your football. I appreciate it. So Penn State, Georgia, or Penn State, SMU, and Georgia, the one at Ohio State, Tennessee game would get Oregon. Boise State would get the winner of, let me backtrack a little bit. Georgia gets the winner of Notre Dame, Indiana. Oregon gets Ohio State, Tennessee. Boise State gets the Penn State, SMU game. And Clemson, not Clemson, but Arizona State gets the Texas winner. And Texas is going to be playing against, what does Texas have? Texas is playing Clemson in Austin. So that'll be you got some pretty good matchups here. But people are already talking about the possible weather that you're going to have in Notre Dame. It's probably going to be snowing, and it's going to be some terrible conditions. They're going to be playing on a Friday night, so that's going to make it even worse. The rest of the games are going to be Saturday afternoon. But that game against Indiana is going to be interesting. If you look back over the history of Notre Dame, Indiana, of course, Notre Dame has thoroughly dominated that series, but Indiana has defeated Notre Dame before. I think they 23-5 or something like that with one tie. And this year they have the best team they ever had at Indiana. So if teams before could beat Notre Dame, it's very possible that a team from Indiana can beat Notre Dame this year. Now, both teams with one loss. Notre Dame didn't lose to anybody competitive. They got upset. I think it was Northern Illinois that beat them. Indiana lost to Ohio State. So this is going to be a pretty good matchup. A lot of people think that Indiana shouldn't be there. They don't think that SMU should be there. And they don't think Boise State should be having a bye. All these things factor into people's opinions. But what you're going to find is, like I've been telling you all along, all these conferences have been set up the same. You got 2 or 3 teams at the top of each conference, You got 2 or 3 teams at the bottom, and you got everybody else in the middle. If you take all those middle tier teams from all these different conferences, shake them up and put them in a bag and shake them up, you get what you're getting now. Parity. Now, the elite teams, the SEC teams, the top 2 or 3 have been elite. You cannot take that from them. But you're going to have to play those teams and not make any mistakes. If you show up like a TCU did and you realize that, the stage might be a little bit too bright and you play afraid, then you're not going to do very well. But if these teams start to show up and they don't freeze up, which we've seen some instances from SMU and Indiana, like the bright lights were just too bright for them and they just froze up. If they play like that, if they start out too slow, then they're going to get blown out. But I think the fact that Indiana struggled against Michigan, struggled against Ohio State, after they realized that, hey, this is just another football team and start playing, they started to come back. And they started to play Indiana football at the end of the game. If they play like that the whole game, then Notre Dame just might have a problem. So Alabama fans, I realize that, the SEC is tough, but this is a national tournament. This is not the SEC tournament. The SEC tournament, just like all the other conferences, took place throughout the regular season. So if you think that everybody in the SEC should represent the entire championship bracket, then you got another thing coming. But what I would agree with you is this. You got 4 teams from the Big Ten. Should have been probably 4 from the SEC. That's 8 out of the 12 teams. Why not just separate those 2 big conferences and let them play it out amongst each other? The top 4 Big Ten teams versus the top 4 SEC teams. You got a division of a championship, and everybody else play a championship. That's about the only way that you're going to make some people happy. But as long as there's a national tournament, one conference cannot dominate the entire tournament. Otherwise, you have no true championship. We saw that in years past when you just selected 2 teams from the same conference to go play for a national championship. What sense does that make? If I play you in the regular season and I beat you, I should not have to see you again unless there's a playoff bracket where you played your way back to me, and then it would be okay. But just to select somebody and say, well, since you guys played a good game in your conference, you guys should be playing for the national championship because we feel that you are the best. Well, you might be, but once you lose, then you lost control of your situation. Louis Toussaint, 99, I'm back. How you doing, man? Trying to rap about this college football playoff. What do you think about the seedings that they have going on right now? Oregon, they appear to be the best team, primarily because they're probably the fastest team. And unless you find a way to slow that speed down, you're going to have difficulty with Oregon. And I think the best way to do that is to run it right at them, chew up that clock, and wear them out. Keep the clock moving. But if you try to get into a track meet, then I don't think you can outrun Oregon. But Georgia is a dangerous team. They got a lot of heart. I still think that their window of opportunity is closing. If they don't knock them off this year, then they're going to have to rebuild. They got some good quarterback play off the bench the other day. That guy from Raymond County, I think I didn't like him in high school. He seemed a little bit cocky when he was playing against teams that they should beat. But when he played against teams that were decent, he didn't do so well. But it was still good enough to get him a scholarship to Georgia. And he came in and played better in relief for Carson Beck, better than I thought he would. So I have to give him credit for that. But coming off the bench is a surprise to a lot of defenses. But if they know that you're going to be starting, then you're going to see a different game plan for the backup quarterback than what you saw the other night from Texas. So keep an eye on that. But Georgia's still a very dangerous team. Boise State, better than you think they are. The only loss that they have is a 3-point loss to Oregon. And that running back is for real. So if you don't wrap him up and get him on the ground and keep on wrapping him up, he's going to pop one. And he's going to pop another one. And before you know it, the momentum is going to be on Boise State side. The only downfall that they have, they get that bye, so they won't get a playoff game on their home field, which would have been a treat for a lot of fans because that's probably going to be another snow game, just like Penn State and Indiana. And Arizona State, I told you that was the best team in the Big 12 4 or 5 weeks ago. It just took them a while to get going. And they're going to be tough to beat, especially with a bye. They got to find a way to keep themselves sharp, so when they do play, they're going to be ready to play. And what else I want to say? Speaking of the Big 12, a lot of people are also in outrage about the Colorado situation. Colorado is going to be playing BYU in the Alamo Bowl. Well, these are two teams from the same conference. And it's not unusual for two teams from the same conference to play in a bowl game. It's still pretty rare, but it's happened before in the SEC. I remember 50 years ago, Tennessee played Florida in the Gator Bowl. So, Alabama played LSU for the so-called national championship. So it happens. It's not unusual. But this one is a little bit unusual because Colorado is in the Pac-12 slot. As you know, that the Pac-12 pretty much folded, and they don't have enough to fill those playoff slots that were negotiated years ago. So being that Colorado was in the Pac-12 last year, they were able to accept them in the Alamo Bowl under the Pac-12 banner and take the Big 12 team, BYU. This is why you have two teams from the same conference. Should be an interesting matchup because possibly been the Big 12 championship game. Bounce here or there, it would have been the Big 12 game. But Deion has said he's going to play his players and not going to sit out. As you know, a lot of athletes nowadays, they have opted to not play in bowl games if they're not relevant because they're concerned about their future. They don't want to get hurt. But as I said before, if you're concerned about getting hurt, then you're probably going to get hurt at some point. But I understand you want to try to protect your future. But with the NIL that they have now, a lot of these guys are already millionaires. So to worry about getting hurt at this point is probably ridiculous because they got all those $1 million insurance policies that will cover them if they did get hurt. So I don't see that as being a big issue. But Deion said they're going to finish what they started, and they want to send a message to the rest of the Big 12 that we are actually the best team, and defeating a BYU team soundly, who pretty much control the Big 12 all the way up to the last 3 weeks of the season. It will send a strong message for Colorado. But don't get too excited about Colorado in the future. As I said, even though Deion said he's not going anywhere, I don't believe it. I don't believe it until I see it. But if he did stay, he's got a good foundation he's building. And it would be, if he can find, he already got a quarterback, supposedly, that can step in and replace his son. So Colorado would be a dangerous team moving forward if they can continue to build the way that they're building. But I just think Deion is more about himself, him and his, I should say. And because of that, I don't think he's going to stay in Colorado very long. But that Colorado-BYU matchup would be pretty good, as well as some other matchups that we have in these college football playoffs. We'll have more on that later. But I just wanted to come in and remind you about the teams that were selected, some of the matchups, and then the obvious outrage. The SEC feels entitled that he's pretty much should have half the teams in the playoffs, which defeats the purpose, in my opinion. If you're going to have a national tournament, have a national tournament. And having too many teams from one conference is not conducive to a good playoff system. And when you add to the fact that you got the other big conference, the Big 10, that's another 4 teams that they have in there. That's 7 out of the 12 teams from 2 conferences. So is it balanced? Probably not. Do you have most of the best teams? Yes. Are they seated correctly? Probably not. But the way that they have it set up, it's a pretty good setup the way they have it. So it's going to make for some interesting football, not this week, next week. There's also been a release of all the bowl games. So if you look that up, you can find out where your favorite team is playing. So until next time, this has been Sports for Real. I'm going to be like Kansas City. I'm going to bounce off the goalpost. I got to go to work. Exciting day today. As always, you guys, wherever you are in the world, have a great day. And I'll catch you on the other side. Also, if you like what I'm saying, subscribe, man. Hit that like button. I never get any likes, man. Subscribe, like, send me a postcard. Till next time, I catch you guys on the other side. This has been Sports for Real. I'm out. Got to go to work.